God writes beautiful stories, and we don't always see the big picture in the midst of pain, loss, or disappointment. It's wonderful to take the journey with Dr. Billy Graham. This is not a memoir, but there are slices of life that are absolutely delightful as you read Nearing Home, Life, Faith, and Finishing Well. Franklin Graham is the president of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and much of the encouragement to write this book came from him. I know you're delighted, as I am, to stand back and look at what God did with your father's love of the game of baseball.
As a young boy here in Charlotte, his dream as a young man was not to be a preacher. It was to be a professional baseball player. And as a young boy, he met Babe Ruth. He came to Charlotte, Babe Ruth did, and my grandfather took him down, and he got to see him and shake his hand, and it was such a big impression upon his life. But as a young boy standing at the pitcher's mound or standing on home plate with a bat in his hand, his vision and his dream was to be able to play professional baseball one day and to go to the great stadiums of this country. He didn't get to play professional baseball. But the interesting thing, God took him to the great stadiums of this country. Instead of hitting the baseball out of the park, he preached the gospel of Jesus Christ, and there was a flood of people every time that came down to home plate to receive Jesus Christ by faith into their heart's home. And that was my father's, God has, I don't know if it's a sense of humor, but he lets us fulfill our dreams sometimes in a different way than what we had planned. I'm sure you didn't plan to be on television every day as a young girl.
Absolutely no thought in this direction. But I did want to make people happy. I wanted to be a social worker. But you see, without Jesus, I couldn't offer them a hope that would work in every situation. Jesus is the living hope for everybody,
Absolutely.
no matter where they are. I love your dad tying together his loyal team, George Beverly Shea, 103?
He is 102, be 103 in February.
And Cliff Barrows, 88. Yep. And he says, this is the team, and together they called people really to their eternal home, to getting that settled. Yeah. And that's a strong emphasis in the book.
Well, it's my father will always tell you it's been a team effort. It hasn't been Billy Graham, but it's been Cliff, it's been Bev, it's been the people in the office in Minneapolis or here in Charlotte, but more importantly, it's the donors. Mm-hmm. It's the people that have been sacrificially giving $5, $10, $20, $30, $50 a month, whatever they could, that have financed my father to be able to take the gospel around the world. And just like for you at 100 Huntley and for us here at BGA, there is an army of people who can't go themselves but financially give to make it possible. And so my father was always very grateful for the people that made it possible financially for him to do what God had called him to do. So it's not just his team, but it's the supporters behind the team. And so my father, when you go through the library, you'll see very clearly my father wants to give emphasis to, not to himself, but to the team and the donors behind him.
There was some conflict about the library and about your mother's resting place. Mm-hmm. Your dad resolved part of that, didn't he?
My father, he made the decision. I think adult children, we have to be careful sometimes as how we try to influence our parents. My father had in his mind what he wanted. He grew up in Charlotte. This was his home, and he wanted to come back to Charlotte. My mother was born in China. It would be impossible for her to go back to be buried where she grew up. But my father wanted to be, he felt he was on the road all of his life, traveling, gone, but he wanted to be back to where his roots were. His, mother, father buried in Charlotte, his grandparents, his uncles and aunts, and his history. as the Graham family. He wanted to be buried here in Charlotte, and
He's honored here. It's the Billy Graham Parkway, right out here.
but of course, Mother, she loved the little piney cove where you went to visit her. She wanted to be buried there, but they agreed that whoever would go to heaven first would make the decision, and the one that was left behind. So if the daddy died first, then Mother would make that decision. If she died first, then Daddy would make that decision. So Daddy decided he wanted to be buried here. My mother's buried here, and her tombstone is very interesting. As kids, we'd go through a construction zone, and you'd have to wait, and the person with the stop sign or go slow sign, and you'd be delayed going through the work area. At the end, many times there was a sign, "End of construction. Thank you for your patience." And my mother would point, and she'd say, "I want that on my tombstone." So when she passed away, all of us children, we agreed. And we don't always agree.
All
But
five
we
children?
all agreed. That's exactly what Mama wanted on her tombstone.
She wasn't kidding.
No, she wasn't kidding.
I am looking forward to seeing
So
that.
it's there.
End of construction. Thank you for your
Thank
patience.
you for your patience.
Well, that is very poignant because he's still working on all of us to make us all he wants us to be.
That's right.
You'll be encouraged. Let Dr. Billy Graham journey with you wherever you are in your construction mission, his construction of you. It's available simply by connecting with us, and it's our thank you for your gift to this ministry this month.